Hey guys, here doing a breakdown of DDP versus Sean Strickland 1 for the upcoming fight between DDP and Sean Strickland 2 this weekend. So getting right into it, just a difference in styles here. Sean Strickland kind of has this American Philly shell boxing stance with his upper body and a Muay Thai lower body stance. It's very unusual, and he's really the only one who does this, but it does seem to make him susceptible to takedowns. Because of this stance, he has a really, really good teep and he has a really, really good jab, and he's able to pepper people with them and keep his defense very high. He doesn't tend to get hit very often. He has, I think, one of the lowest statistics on getting hit in the UFC, if not the lowest. I would make the argument Sean Strickland is probably the best pure boxer currently in the UFC. And opposed to him is DDP, who kind of has almost the opposite style. DDP has a style where you're running forward, lots of blitzy motion, switching his stance, lots of high kicks, lots of awkward just techniques, lots of weird spinny techniques. He comes over the top and punches funky. It's very, very, very hard to say that he has a style other than the style that he has, if that makes any sense. Some people are who they are and it works for them, and there's nothing wrong with that. But would I teach what DDP does to other people? No, probably not. I would be way more inclined to teach what Sean Strickland does to a student. One thing that I see Sean do with his jab often is he throws his jab and he moves off to the left side. So he puts his head off to this left side over his jab and he crosses his back foot. So just like that. And you get this crisscross position as he's doing this. I do think this could be taken advantage of just by, if you are going to time the jab as the jab comes in and parry hitting the kick to the calf at the same time. I'm sure Sean's had to experience that often, so he's probably better than most, even out of this awkward position, blocking the kick. But I do think this is a way that you could work a calf kick off on Sean Strickland. Here we have an example of Sean throwing a really good jab. He throws his jab straight out. The right hand is up. His chin is behind his shoulder here, making it hard for the hand to come over the top. He keeps his hip back when he's finishing here, and he's on the ball of the foot. And what this does for you in a MMA, Muay Thai, kickboxing scenario is it makes it hard for the person to get off an easy leg kick on you. A lot of times people sit into the jab really heavy and they sit on their front foot and their heel hits the floor. When their heel hits the floor heavy, you're going to be kind of planted on that front, right? You've moved all your weight to that front leg. And once you have done that, your leg's on the ground for a solid second, which is enough time for somebody to kick you. This is one of the reasons I think Sean is so good about just not getting leg kicked. Secondary, when he was in the high guard position here, I love the high guard. I think it's a great defense. But the problem with the high guard is in MMA gloves, it could be split. In boxing or kickboxing, the gloves are large and often will get caught up on the glove themselves or on your forearms, right? So you're dealing with a target that's something like this big. Well, if my hands are up, this gap is not very big. But if we're in MMA, the glove is very small, so getting between something like this is a lot easier. So in the high guard, where you kind of are squared up how DDP is and his body squared up as well, you're pushing yourself into this line where he can get hit right through the guard. And you see how both his arms are up. He's basically kind of in correct position, but he's getting cracked with that jab. And that was a very hard, clean jab, and that sends him back. What you're going to see here is you're going to see Sean throw a real nice jab again, land nice and clean on DDP. This is kind of the tail of the tape of the first round, really. Sean kind of just outpoints DDP in the first round, but DDP switches his stance and then comes right back in to the inside of the jab and almost lands on Sean. It's hard to see if he landed. I don't think he does. Yeah, I think it just either just touches or just misses him, but it doesn't seem like it had much on it, even if it lands. But DDP uses this later, and this does land more. I think DDP should look to switch his stance against Sean often. I think his left body kick, his left head kick is a good move against somebody like this. Somebody who has a jab-centric game like Sean Strickland, that jab could be disrupted by being in the opposite stance of them, because the jab is harder to land typically on somebody who's southpaw, as long as you're the one with the lead hand higher. And DDP in this fight often has his hand higher up, and when he switches his stance to southpaw, he gets hit with the jab far less. One of the things that I saw in this fight often is both of these guys break stance. So right here you can see Sean switches his stance to not get hit here. DDP virtually every time he backs up, he switches his stance. I don't think that's a good habit almost in any scenario. We kind of recently saw Israel Adesanya switch his stance back and forth in front of somebody, dropping his hand. He got caught over the top. This works all the time until it doesn't, is what I like to say. It is one of those things. There is certain defenses that are very addictive. Pulling straight back tends to get you not hit very much. People are shitting all over the pool, right? Because Adesanya just got knocked out. So pulling out of range, and people shit all over it, but nobody shits on it when Sean Strickland does it pretty much every single time somebody throws a punch. The problem is eventually you get caught. If you're very short for your weight classes, it's not going to apply. But if you're medium height to tall and you're a decent striker, you're probably going to use a pull pretty often. The problem is when you finally eat that shot, it tends to be over because the shots that you get hit with when a pull fails, like when you pull out of range and when it fails, is the hardest shots that are people throwing. So it's the head kicks, it's the overhands, it's stuff like that. The second thing is most of the time when people pull, they tend to drop their hands. So they don't tend to like be here and pull and keep their hands up like this. Sean does a really good job of this for the most part, but he drops his lead arm because he does it Philly style. So he's like this, but you'll see him kind of bring his arms up like this often. But a lot of guys, what they do is they pull and they go like this, or they pull and they go like this, right? So John Jones does it all the time because he's super tall and long. Israel Adesanya did it forever and basically didn't get caught up often up until recently. Sean does it at times. A lot of guys do this. I don't think it's necessarily bad if you're keeping your hands up, but ultimately every defensive motion you make can get countered. And if you are relying on this one thing so often to where it can be kind of guessed where you're going to be going, you're going to get caught. And Sean starts getting caught more with overhands as the fight goes on here. Same thing with Adesanya recently. He was starting to get caught with these shots over the top more. He got, even in an early career, you think having Gaslam, guys like that coming over the top and clipping him. It is not only the only defense you can do to get away from everything. And so stance switching has its time. I love stance switching. Pulling has its time. I love pulling. I just think a lot of guys lean on these a little too much, and it starts to be an issue later in their career. Here's a good example of Sean Strickland crossing his back feet while he throws the jab. So he throws the jab, and then he lands, good jab, and he's over. Now his back foot's high, right? And he crosses, and he's in this kind of awkward position right here. Then he tries to throw a counter jab as he steps back through, and he actually kind of punches DDP in the shoulder here, and DDP goes for the overhand. And this is what I'm talking about. Look where Sean's hands are right now, and look what he's doing. So this is what I meant. A lot of guys, they pull and they put the arms out to get away from these shots. This is just not the best move. And then he squares completely up, so he cross stances here, so he gets completely switch, like not even switch stance, this is just square, and walks backwards. This is early round one, so that is an issue for me. Again, DDP does a lot of goofy ass shit, and I'll highlight it, but this is how you end up getting caught with a big shot at some point. Here Sean's going to fake a jab and then pump a jab. He has a really good jab, and also this is where the high guard is going to be failing DDP in this situation. Having your guard be a high guard in MMA has its time and place. It's just when somebody has a very jab centric style and you know that they tend to just come down to pipe, you're gonna need those hands. If your hands are just right here the whole time and you're kind of leaning forward, those jabs are just gonna get through over time. Especially when somebody's such a good jab as Sean Strickland, you kind of have to reach a little bit. You have to be out in front of yourself a little bit because ultimately you're not going to probably have the reflexes to stop Sean Strickland's jab. He's been honing that for so long. So you need to get out in front of it a little bit so that you have time to stop it. If your hand is right next to your face and he's already come in, you have very little time to deal with that before it's hitting you. So again, I think having the hand in more of a traditional stance, more something where the hand's a little out in front of you, is probably the smarter move there. But DDP's a bull, man. He just puts his arms up and kind of goes forward. Here's Sean landing another jab on the high guard. DDP crossing his feet, beating super square, dropping both his hands. and then comes back to stance. Again, that's something you see with DDP. Pretty much anytime he gets hit, he switches stance. It's almost advantageous if you land on DDP to kind of throw a second shot. Right here, you're going to see Sean Strickland land a really good kick to the body on DDP, and he gets him reacting to these. He's already hit a few of these in this round. Again, this is something he just has to go to in their next fight. Right after Sean lands that, DDP throws a roundhouse kick to the body, and that was super solid. And honestly, I think that was much worse for Sean than the teep was for DDP right before that. And you can kind of look at Sean's face, and you can kind of see that that was not enjoyable for him. I think that's a great kick for DDP in this whole fight. Sean has this Philly shell style, and the Philly shell does not defend kicks to the body well or to the head. And if you have a good left roundhouse kick that's fast and it's hard to deal with, it's a real easy way to get guys' hands coming low so you can come over the top. DDP hard kicks to the body, occasional to the head, and then comes over the top and then wrestles low. You just aren't going to know what to do with your hands. So here DDP will switch his stance, feints a little, and then comes upstairs, goes to that head kick, lands that a little bit. Now, not the hardest shot in the world, but you're getting hit with somebody's foot, so even if it slaps you a little bit, it sucks. There's a lot more weight behind a kick than a punch. DDP absolutely has to use that left kick in this fight. There's no question in my mind. Here's a good little sequence from Sean. He lands the jab here, then he lands the rear teep. DDP comes back with the kick again and gets more or less blocked. Now, again, even that block, that was not a good block. That was a lot of him blocking with his elbow. He got shin across his elbow. He barely blocked with his other arm. It made him switch his stance. Sean was going to take that kick, so he completely switched his stance to get away from that side because he knew it was going to suck. So he kind of took it to the side as opposed to just take it across his body. He's doing that because these kicks hurt. They're not enjoyable to take, and he's trying to like mitigate that as much as possible. But that's something you can look at and predict and use to your advantage. You can fake with that hip, get him to square up, and then you can blitz. Which, if you watch, DDP kind of does here. He fakes that hip, and then he comes through and starts throwing. Now, he doesn't land anything there, but Sean squares because he thinks that DDP is going to throw another kick to the body there, and he reacts to it. So when DDP brings his hip around, Sean completely squares up, and then DDP blitzes exactly what I said he was going to do, which is funny because I didn't remember seeing that from earlier. But this is a setup that would be very obvious to use. Here you're going to see DDP go for a leg kick. They are going to say that was checked by Sean Strickland. I don't think that was. I'm sure they went shin to shin a little bit, but to me that looked like a really clean kick to the calf. If DDP can get these off by mixing it up, that'd be really useful on somebody like Sean. DDP here is going to be fighting the front hand, be high and come over the top. Now he misses that over the top, but because Sean Strickland uses a Philly shell, his left hand's always low, and when you switch your stance, if you're in a more traditional stance, your lead hand is higher than their lead hand. Typically, lead hand wins fights if it's higher and it's in opposite stances. And as the fight goes on, that is a shot that DDP lands and progressively gets closer and closer. The commentary team that talks about it, they progressively gets closer with this kind of lead overhand and rear overhand right. And we'll look at it again. There's the over the top, and then he uses that to set up going for the left head kick here, which Sean blocks, but again, it throws him out of position. I think that is such a good technique for him in this fight. When you're facing a boxer who has a good jab, the better move is just, if you can, switch your stance, fight lead hand, have high lead hand, and go for left roundhouse kicks, really hard left roundhouse kicks, because you can shut down his rear hand, and then you also kind of shut down the jab hand. And if you could shut those two things down, then you're kind of with Sean Strickland. He's not doing a whole lot of things, right? He just throws teeps and throws jabs. He does it really, really, really well. So if you could shut down his jab, and then you can basically make it to where he also is going to have a hard time throwing his rear side, now he just has the teeps. So you have one big thing that you really have to deal with. Here, Sean's going to throw a jab, cross his feet square, and then DDP is going to run him over with the takedown. And this is another part of DDP's game that I think is going to be a big part of this upcoming fight. We'll see. Who knows what he's going to do. He's a wild man. But I do think DDP clearly had the strength advantage and the wrestling advantage, and I think that's probably only gotten better since his fight with Sean. He also had a fight against Adesanya, who he finished on the ground. I could see him taking this fight to the mat and making it on the mat for 5 to 10 minutes and just dominating some time and tiring out Sean, and then making it to where the striking is much more sloppy, which favors DDP if we're being honest. Sean does get back up, but you could see that DDP just ragdolls him down to the ground again. And I think, again, if you did a whole camp where all you're really trying to do is just this to Sean, I think it's actually a very possible way to beat him. So a lot goes on here. So DDP is in this stance. He'll switch his stance over, and he beats Sean to the jab here. Then he walks across. So what happens is when you face a southpaw, if you're inside their front foot, right, not to the outside. They always talk about with southpaws being outside of the front foot, and you want to beat high hand wins, and that's true because that's the better position. But if you're trying to land the jab, normally when you get to the inside of someone's foot, you actually have the jab position on a southpaw. And then Sean will do the same thing. He walks off to his right and he lands a jab himself. Again, you can see where his foot is. His foot is inside of DDP's. That's why the jab is going to be more available there. Then what you're going to see after that is DDP fakes the kick and goes to the body kick, squaring Sean up again, getting Sean to switch his stance, and then he blitzes because he's always kind of blitzing off of that kick and tries to come forward and land. Now again, that doesn't really land and it looks super sloppy, but if he can get Sean square and he can blitz and get one of those overhands is more likely to land than when Sean is in a good, proper sideways boxing stance. So you kick him, you get him square. When he's square, he's easier to hit with overhands. And Sean steps across, throws a good jab, counters the overhand. But again, this is where DDP is starting to get closer and closer with these overhands because Sean steps off to his left side. He crosses his front foot like we just talked about. So earlier I was saying Sean likes to throw his jab like that. Like he throws his jab from this crossed position, right? So he'll throw his jab, does a really good job here. He's on the ball of his foot. Bang, hits the jab. But he leads to the left side when he does this, and he crosses his back foot. So this punch over the top doesn't quite get him, but it gets goddamn close. And then he crosses his feet, and then he's back into stance here, just like so. That was a clean jab, but it does leave him open to these overhands. And again, these overhands start to land later in the fight. And the same technique here, jabs, steps off to that side, almost gets overhand. Almost eats the overhand there, right? So we go back a step here, and DDP is looking because Sean is going towards DDP's power side. Sean steps his back foot across himself. It's a little hard to see here. Then steps out with the jab, misses the jab over the top. Right hand is not in the greatest position it could be in. Both arms are kind of away from his face. Sean has good reflexes, drops his left hand, shoulder rolls, and barely misses that punch, but he's crossing his back foot behind him like we talked about a second ago. Then he tries to look for a left hook himself, almost lands the left hook, and both guys are lucky to have been not hit at all in that series. The overhand has done an effective job of getting Sean Strickland scared, so when DDP comes forward, he's worried about the overhand and not the calf kick, and so he's kind of pushing himself away and then gets calf kicked. And again, the commentators the whole time are talking about how Sean's just checking all these, and I don't think he is. I don't think that was a check kick. I think he got hit there. Here's going to be a good example of Sean just landing really clean through the high guard with the jab. I wouldn't say every single time, but almost every single time he gets hit with the jab, he switches stances. When he switches stances, he steps his right foot to the inside of Sean, and he often throws the jab, which he does here, and almost lands a jab on Sean. If I was Sean Strickland's coach, every time DDP switched stances, I would be telling him to throw a teep to the body, which he does here, but he does get it swiped off to the side and countered on the leg kick. You just can't be lazy about it. He needs to fake it a little bit more, but he could definitely land that. Right after this, when DDP feels like Sean is on the inside of his foot, he tends to throw these kicks, and this is where these were getting close. That doesn't land, but again, it keeps Sean nice and honest. When DDP fakes hard low like this, Sean's reaction often is this. And we all know that this is not a good reaction. We recently saw Israel Adesanya get knocked out basically doing the same thing. We've seen John Jones do this for years, normally poking people in the eyes, but he also has a huge wingspan. but he'll get popped on the end of this. There's a lot of guys who do this, and the problem with doing this is eventually your luck with this runs out. So what I do think that the pull, like pulling away, is a great move in MMA and boxing and kickboxing. I just think that guys, it becomes very addictive because it works so well so often that it feels like, well, I should just always do it. And eventually you get timed. And this motion that Sean's making right now is the motion that continually gets him hit later in the fight. And just the way that this whole thing kind of plays out here, it just doesn't look very good. But Sean right away comes right back with a really solid jab and pops DDP. And that is kind of, and that lands a right hand. I don't know if this lands. They made it sound like he did. And I think he did, just judging by how DDP moves here. But that little habit that Sean has where he puts his arm out like that is not a great one. And Sean Strickland easily takes the first, in my opinion. There's no question. We start off the second round. Sean's already landed a nice little jab. He got a second to go, but Sean again goes to the left side here and throws his jab, misses off to the side, and just barely gets away from that overhand. And again, it's just something I can see being an issue. He has really good head movement, and he's very hard to hit. I'll give him that. But it just seems like your time is always going to run out with doing that. Right here, you're going to see DDP land a leg kick. Gets Sean kind of upright, doesn't see the leg kick. Nice little calf kick. And for as good as Sean is normally at blocking strikes to the legs, in this fight, I actually feel like he eats a pretty good amount of them compared to any other fight I've ever seen. Kind of a goofy exchange here in a second. Sean's going to throw a jab, and he kind of lands, but he rolls away from it and actually gets hit with a back fist there. Neither one of those punches landed super clean, but it's kind of an example of just Sean kind of sticking to what he does and DDP kind of fucking Looney Tuning his way through fights and winning. He is hard to deal with, and he's very awkward, and it's very, very unconventional. Right here, you're going to see Sean kind of land a little jab here. I don't even know if he landed that. I think it was deflected, but you'll see that DDP, once again, he switches his stance and immediately goes to his jab himself. And again, I'm not even sure if he landed that himself. It's hard to say if either one of those guys really landed there, but pretty much every single time Sean gets close to landing or lands a jab, DDP switches his stance and he comes back with his lead side. DDP is going to have the classic southpaw conundrum here. If you look at both of their feet right now, DDP has stepped on Sean Strickland's front foot, and essentially they're fighting feet. This happens all the time when you're facing the opposite stance. But what's funny about this is basically illegal in boxing, but this is not illegal in MMA at all. And one of the things that I learned when I was a kid, with my excellent childhood I had, was one of my friends taught me a street fighting move, and what it was if you're gonna get into a fight with somebody, you look down at whatever like legs forward, because usually like people don't stand like totally squared, like one leg's forward, like they're gonna throw a baseball, right? And you step on that foot with whatever foot you want, and you punch them or you shove them as hard as you can, because even if you graze them, their foot's stopped, right? So they're gonna lean back, and that foot's stuck, and they kind of fall backwards. It's surprisingly effective. Here's an example of you just can't stand in front of Sean with a high guard, not doing anything. Super, super heavy, solid jab there. Boom. Here's Sean actually hits a really nice jab on DDP that probably nobody saw, but this is a clean jab right here, right on the face. And again, though, just where his arm is when he finishes is a bit of an issue. So the left arm goes out, and he has to get his right arm across, but he doesn't all the way, and he kind of gets slapped with this overhand. Now, I think this grazed him, and the jab was a lot better punch, but this is, again, DDP progressively gets closer and closer to hitting this to where later in the rounds, he is hitting this a lot. Probably more than almost anybody is hitting Sean with strikes like this. DDP switches stance and then immediately goes to a body kick here. If you're DDP, you just got to kick him. You got to kick him to the body often. You got to do these roundhouse kicks to the head and body. You got to make him uncomfortable being in that Philly shell, because when he is in Philly shell and he could stand in front of you, he is just going to pop you to death with that jab. One of the things I do like, and one of the reasons I think Sean Strickland's defense is so much better than so many people's, even though he does a low lead hand. A lot of guys who do the low lead hand, they only back out one way. They only back out lead arm down, and they pull away, and the arm never comes up. But Sean doesn't do that. Sean switches back and forth. So he goes from a Philly shell where he's just leaning away like this, or like this, or like this, to at times he is literally bringing his arm all the way completely in the air, and you can kind of see it here. He brought that lead arm super high, right arm's down. Now, yeah, I mean, it's going to leave your body a little bit open here. Always going to have that opening if you bring it up, and if you bring this down, you always have the opening to the head. But this keeps you from eating overhands. He does a much better job at that than most guys. Most guys that have like really slick, like good head movement and like long jabs, they never bring their arms up like over their shoulders like at all. Like their arms are always down here, and they inevitably, almost all of them, end up eating really hard overhands and getting dropped. This isn't boxing, and you can't get away with getting dropped. If it's a 12-round fight in boxing, you get dropped. If you're the better guy skill-wise, you're still going to probably win that fight. It's very, very rare that you're going to get popped so hard that you can't come back from a 10 count and then like at least make it to the end of the round. MMA is a very fast sport. The gloves are smaller, you're getting hit harder. So if you come over the top and you get cracked with an overhand and then you fall and they're on you and they hit you 2 or 3 times, that fight's over. It doesn't matter how much you could have recovered. You have to make sure that you're in a position where you're not going to be eating these big over the top shots. And Sean, for the most part, does a much better job of this than almost anybody else who has a style where the lead arm's down very often. So how do you counteract that? Well, one of the ways is if you know that his hands are going to come high, he's probably not going to see low. So what you do is you fake like you're coming up high like this. That brings Sean's hands up, which again, defensively here upstairs is great. Now he's not going to eat the overhands. It's going to be very hard for somebody to come in and hit him with boxing, but then he's going to hit you with a leg kick instead. And that's just the game, man. There's always something open. And again, here's DDP doing the why I oughta, like just a wah, like and getting Strickland to bite on it is so hilarious to me. He's the only guy who can like literally look like he's gonna just like pull back and bitch slap you and get a reaction because he might actually throw a punch from there. Strickland's gonna land a jab. DDP's gonna switch his stance again. I don't know if he landed that, but it was close. But he switches his stance almost every single time. Once again, just highlighting this. DDP at this point has Strickland worried that anytime he's dropping in like this, that he's coming upstairs. So Strickland's hands are coming high, which is smart. But again, we went back to earlier. I said that once your hands are up, obviously the next opening is going to be the body. DDP does something smart here. He goes double hooks, right? So left hook, right hook, body. And I think those are two clean shots. It's hard to see if the left hook landed again. That's the problem with fights in general. You don't always know it lands because you're just not able to see a 360-degree angle of something. But I have a feeling both of those landed. Here DDP throws an overhand left and then an overhand right. So an overhand 3 and 6. So overhand, and then steps through as Sean's backing up, and nice body kick. It's a really clean body kick from DDP. Again, that left kick has to be a big portion of his upcoming fight. So I like, if you are struggling with the jab, what is called the overhand 3. I don't think this is done enough. This is a very wild version of it, but sometimes when you're struggling to hit somebody with the jab, trading the jab's not the move because they're going to have a better jab than you. So moving your head off the center line and making them come forward so that the left hook on your side is more likely to land. You'll kind of see it here. What's going to happen is he's going to kind of slip the jab. And then, because he probably isn't going to land his own jab back, he's going to go for a punch because you can see where Strickland's hand is. If he throws the jab, Strickland's probably parrying it, right? So he's going to try to come over the top, and he gets inside that. So the only thing that saves Strickland here is just good head movement. You can see how close that gets, right? I think this works really well, especially if you're the shorter guy or if you're coming underneath him often. I think this is an excellent move. Sometimes you just can't trade jab for jab because their jabs are just too good and they're going to parry the jab. So their ability to stop the jab and their ability to hit you with the jab is too good. So one of the ways you can get around that is you're slipping, and as you slip, you're throwing essentially an overhand very high and up over the rear hand. And then they have to reactionarily get away from it with just their head movement because their hand's not going to be in position. Here you're going to see DDP blitz. He's going to blitz with his right hand over the top, big overhand. He's going to miss, and then Sean is going to miss his left hook here. DDP is going to step through, switch his stance to the outside. Sean's right hand is not in position right now because he just missed his left hook. He's actually going to hit a pretty hard left hook here, right? Real hard shot right on the cheekbone there / temple. And that was just because Sean's right hand was low. Sean was doing everything right. Basically, it's just the one time that his right hand wasn't actually really up. Most of the time, Sean's rear hand is really solid. Like, he does a very good job of keeping that high. Right after that exchange, what you see is DDP then immediately goes for a leg kick and kind of lands it. Nothing crazy, but still kind of lands it. This is going back to that overhand 3 coming through, and this is why I think you have to throw that if you're kind of losing the jab game. So DDP here kind of just barely grazes that jab off right there. You can see it's just skimming off his head. DDP parries it just barely off to the side. DDP isn't going to be able to land a good jab here because Sean's hand's in the way. So he's got to come up and over the hand, right? And it kind of grazes Sean there in this awkward punch, right? That's a very hard punch to block unless your hand's super high. If his rear hand was like way the hell up here, he could have probably blocked that, but it's coming super high to the head here. And then what's coming afterwards, you could see Sean's feet. So this is my problem with Sean's footwork. I think Sean has really good like forward footwork, but his backwards footwork is not always the greatest, and he crisscrosses his feet here, which kind of gets him out of position. So now he's just way over his back foot, and he eats that right hand because DDP blitzes through with this super grimacing face here. DDP here feels like Sean is worried about the strikes, and he is, and Sean tries to jab again because this is the problem when you have such a good tool that you kind of always see nails, right? I'm a hammer, everything's nailed. That's kind of the problem with Sean. Like, every solution is throw the jab. So he throws the jab, but he's not in the greatest. Well, he's not in a bad position. It's just that because DDP was able to time it, he gets in and gets into this pretty deep single very fast, and then gets this takedown pretty much right away. Boom. And that was easy. I think DDP absolutely adds a ton of wrestling into this fight coming up, and I think he absolutely should. It's very obvious that he could take down Sean. Very obvious that he's a lot stronger than Sean, and I think the more he does it, the easier it'll get, and the more he'll stay on top. Sean does a really good job of getting up throughout this fight right away, but I still just think, man, why not impose like your physical will? If it's so easy to get him down, why not get on top of them and just make him struggle? People saw this and be like, why do these takedowns matter? I have my personal opinion on it. I think most people who watch MMA look at it through the lens of people who've watched boxing, meaning they look at everything through the idea of headshots, right? If you landed a jab, that should count more than basically everything. If you landed a cross, that should count more than a jab. A hook should count more than a jab or a cross, and then everything else is underneath that, right? Kicks, all that stuff. And I think people who say that have never wrestled and have never probably done kickboxing or something else. Getting jabbed is not fun. Getting hit is not fun to the face at all. But if you are getting hit and you're pulling away from a lot of the shots and they're not hitting you super clean, or they're just kind of grazing you, absolutely getting kicked to the body is much worse. Absolutely getting kicked to the calf is much worse. Absolutely getting taken down. I would rather most people get like semi-clean jabs off on me on a semi-regular basis than have to fight off a super hard takedown from a monster where I have to expend a ton of energy. It's not about like how it physically beats you up. It's about how it physically drains the shit out of you, having to fight it off and then having to stand back up and then separate. It is exhausting. It is absolutely exhausting. And you could look at it the same way as a body shot, in my opinion. If I get taken down and then I have to squirm and fight my way back up to my feet and separate, to me, that is basically the equivalent of like, that guy might as well have kicked me in the stomach, or he might as well punch me in the stomach a couple times. That should count like a body shot because it is such a drain on your resources. This habit right here is one of the habits I think gets Sean in trouble throughout this fight. He drops the left hand low, right hand comes high, so it does defend, but like really just him being out of range defends this mainly. But then also right after goes totally square, beyond square, crosses his back feet. And again, this is one of the reasons I don't think Sean's footwork going backwards always is the greatest. Here, what you're going to see is DDP is going to land a double jab to an overhand. So he's coming in, he double jabs forward. If you look at his front foot, I've said this before, but if you're facing a southpaw or you're facing the opposite stance, normally you want this front foot on the outside of their foot. But if you're trying to land the jab, you need to be in the middle of them like this. And the reason is because jabbing over the shoulder from this outside position is basically impossible, right? So if their shoulder's in the way, you're probably not getting the jab. You're only going to get the punch like a hook over to the outside. So if you want to get the jab off, you have to be in the middle. And right here, what you're going to see is you're going to see DDP. He is going to throw jab, miss, but then he's going to double it up, double jab right there, and that shot lands. And then he's coming over the top, and he grazes that overhand just like so. So for me, DDP wins the second round basically on forward aggression, takedowns. I think he landed slightly heavier shots overall. Also put in the better work. That is going to have more of an effect on the future rounds. Sean did land his jab a bunch, some really clean jabs, but that was really about it. That really kind of did most of the work on DDP's eye right here. But DDP cut Sean a little bit in that last round. You're not going to see it here, but you'll see it in the previous round. If you watch the fight, you can see that it was cut over here slightly. That'll start to show up worse in the fight, but you can't really see it right now. They wiped it off. Something I've said time and time and time and time and time again is when you're facing the opposite stance, you end up fighting the lead hand a lot, and you'll kind of see they're both just touching the lead hand here, they're touching the lead hand here, and that's because it basically controls and dictates everything that's going to go on from there. It's very hard to land the jab on the opposite stance, and you'll kind of see it right here. When the lead hand is there, the lead hand is there. Sean is trying to take the angle to the right side so that he has the angle to the inside of the foot for the jab, but even then, it's just not there. It's a lot harder to land the jab on the opposite stance person. And if you do this for too long in front of Sean, he'll just pick you apart. You can't just walk forward, hands up, and stand in front of Sean, because eventually he will get through, especially if you're in the same stance as him. But he does have that tendency. He leans over the front foot and he crosses that back foot and puts him out of position. Sean throws his jab as the beginning and the end of his combination ultimately, meaning he doesn't set himself up to throw a jab to be able to throw anything else right after. He often throws a singular jab in such a way that he wouldn't be able to easily do a combination afterwards. He does throw his jabs sometimes to set up combinations, but it's very rare. Most of the time, he's leaning into the idea that he's going to throw his jab once, maybe twice, and then he's going to be the complete end of the combination. Very often, he throws a very heavy, crossing his back foot, leaning over the front of his leg and throwing the jab, and then he ends up in this position. Here, DDP switches his stance, and Sean is kind of in a Philly right here. Not really. He's just kind of in more of a traditional position. But DDP is hard to read. He's hard to read on this left kick, and you can't tell where it's going to be. And you can see Sean puts both his arms off to the side, and DDP still gets up and over the top of that. That was a solid kick to the head. He just has a really good left kick to the head. And again, I think that Sean's stance makes it hard for him to block those left side kicks. Sean's going to land a lead teep here, which is smart. He lands this lead teep when DDP switches his stance right there, which is perfect. It's perfect timing to do this. Why? It's because your left leg is in line to someone's belly button when they're in the same stance as you. So if I'm orthodox, you're orthodox, my left teep's going to be easier to land. When you're southpaw and I'm orthodox, my right teep's going to be easier to land. Sean absolutely needs to use these more in his fight. I know I'm harping on that, but honestly, if he throws a lot of teeps through this fight, I do think this could be an issue for DDP. Right here is exactly what I was talking about with the jab counter to the leg kick. Sean tends to like to throw that jab and step his back foot behind himself, and because of that, that puts his left leg forward and heavy, and that leg kick was there, and he ate it pretty solid. And that is a pain in the ass, because then you don't know if it's going to be the leg kick or if he's going to go for an overhand, because it looks the same. And you notice that DDP right there, if we kind of rewind that a little bit, DDP does a little hip feint before he goes in. Hip feint, overhand, in, and blitz. And that can be hard to tell. It's very, very hard to tell if he's throwing the kick or if it's very hard to tell if he's throwing the overhand. And frankly, when you don't really kick yourself as Sean Strickland, and he only has to worry about the jab coming forward, it makes it easier for him to choose a lot of options on how he wants to do his setups. Here's going to be the overhand three counter to the jab again I talk about, where you're kind of throwing this over the top to counter somebody following you down with the jab. And we're going to kind of slow motion this bad boy here, right here. Sean throws the jab, misses more or less over the top. DDP comes over the top, throws his own jab back. Jab, hook, whatever you want to call that. It's not really a traditional punch, but it's going to land, and it's hard to see. It's really hard to see. And again, that's a great punch if you're the shorter man or if you're coming underneath. And then hits the outside leg kick because Sean just throws jabs. Doesn't throw teeps, and as he gets backed up, he does worse. Here, DDP is going to do a little pendulum kick to the body. He's going to step in, boom, body shot, really nice, and then goes for the overhand three, misses the three, but lands the body kick here. Every time DDP just stands in front of Sean, it just brings his arms up. He eats a jab, just every time, boom, right there. Sean's jab's really, really good, and DDP just kind of gives it to him in a lot of these situations. I think if DDP just didn't even bother going to this high guard position, this orthodox high guard position in front of Sean, and just constantly faked like he was going underneath, I just think that it reduces the number of jabs that Sean's been able to land by almost half. There's a lot of times where he's landing these jabs just in this high guard, he's standing directly in front of him kind of position. And again, here it is again, and Sean is going to land the jab, going to go for a left hook, and he goes for a right hook here, and I think he lands that right hook and almost eats a left hook. Now, DDP was kind of rolling away from the right hand, but it still lands in my opinion. It looks like it clipped him. Here is an awkward right hook to the body, but it does land, and I think that's something. I really think DDP just has to go to the body often with Sean, and he has to go to these kicks to the body and these punches to the body often, and also wrestle. I think that's how you get to him. You're going to have a hard time ever hitting Sean Strickland in the head. Again, he has some of the best boxing defense in MMA. DDP is going to throw the overhand three. Sean wises up to it and throws his jab back and blocks. Here, DDP is going to throw an overhand three. Sean wises up to it and blocks it with his right hand, staying in a good stance here. DDP comes back with a kick. Sean checks the kick because he's in good stance, so it's not going to be available. And then immediately, Sean lands a really nice jab on DDP when he tries to high guard him. DDP comes forward with some goofy nonsense, but distracts him enough to land a nice body kick. And that body kick really lands. You can see how much that moves Sean. That was a heavy, heavy shot. And this is the thing. I think people don't appreciate those shots. People look at Sean landing 5-6 jabs, but then they'll see that and be like, and they don't realize like how heavy a shin bone across the body is from somebody kicking like that. It feels like somebody swung a bat at you. I promise you, you'd probably rather get jabbed to the face a few times by Sean Strickland than kicked once in the body by DDP here. Right here, DDP again switches his stance, goes as soon as Sean steps to the inside because Sean's looking for the jab. DDP throws the kick, nice body kick. Anytime he's in the switch stance when Sean is stepping towards the power side, DDP should be thinking about throwing these kicks to the body. That's a very hard shot. Here again, DDP goes back to his traditional stance, goes into a nice, more or less high guard position right here. Sean sees it and goes, hey, that's my opportunity. Throws a jab, lands a jab. That's such a bad position for TDP in front of Sean Strickland. I think it's fine in front of a lot of other guys, but Sean has just such a good jab, such a good split style jab. He'll just split through. But again, talked about it. Look where Sean's at right now. Sean's position is, he's a little too far forward and he switched his back foot. So the counter is there. DDP is going to try to counter the rear teep every time with this little counter, and I think it's smart. He's got to stop those teeps one way or another. Again, Sean doesn't use them enough, in my opinion, in this fight, but he was trying to look for them to counter him. Right here, DDP is going to switch stance. He fights the hand, and then goes straight to the inside of Sean's foot, throws a jab, boom, and lands when Sean is in a semi-square position. At this point, watching this, Sean's just getting backed up. DDP hits another body kick. DDP is starting to put a lot more pressure on Sean. Ducks in, hits a nice little overhand. Sean probably hits a slight jab back. But DDP's pressure, again, when he stands directly in front of him with that high guard, he always gets hit with the jab. But DDP's pressure is clearly pushing Sean back, and he's starting to land, in my opinion, the heavier shots. Right here, Sean does an excellent job. He gets this jab off multiple times. So again, this is an example of if we're trying to land the jab on the opposite stance, where do we want to be? We want to be on the inside of the foot. Not the best position most of the time, but you'll notice here, DDP is going to kind of rush forward a bit. And when that happens, whoops, he's going to eat a jab. Boom. And you can look at where their feet are at. DDP is basically in line to the shoulder now with his face. He's going to eat that first jab, and then he's going to kind of rush forward, eat a second jab, and he's going to kind of try to throw a punch, and he's going to eat actually kind of a third jab right at the end there. And yeah, I mean, 2 solid jabs and kind of a push. A few seconds later, they're going to exchange jabs here at the same time. And I'll be honest, and then right away Sean eats another jab, and they get into an exchange. DDP lands a small uppercut there, I believe, and goes through. Man, the difference is, I think there is a clear power difference. I don't think DDP hits like Alex Pereira level hard, but Sean, I think, reacts worse when he's getting hit from DDP than DDP does from Sean. It seems like DDP could just take more of a beating and maybe just hits a little harder. Your DDP does a really lazy job of a fake kick, and it's pretty obvious from like a mile away. DDP needs to check that kind of shit at the door. I don't think that's useful at all. It's a lot of energy for something that was pretty obviously not going to land, and that's kind of some of the stuff when people look at like his technique's not very good. You could point to something like that. DDP here is going to kind of come with an overhand left, and then he's going to switch his stance. It's impossible to know if that really landed. It looked like he's maybe just grazing him, but he does hit him with this second punch right here. DDP kind of eats a slap, not so much a punch, but he does get this shot off. Kind of a forearm to the side of Sean's head. And they get into just little weird shots that are landing. But it's kind of an example of what I was talking about earlier, where DDP is now progressively getting closer and closer with these overhands. Anytime DDP stands in front of Sean and just kind of looks at him, he ends up eating a jab, and he's just got to get away from that. Sean throws a teep like he should have been a little bit more, but a little lazy on it. And then DDP just kind of moves his hips away, parries the jab off, throws a combo. It ends on a nice leg kick. Probably should have went to the calf, but still nice. Now, because earlier when DDP dips super hard right here, Sean reacts in such a way that he has to be worried. He's not sure what is going to happen here, so he kind of turns it into, am I fighting the overhand? Am I fighting the takedown? I'm not really sure, which is good. Always having a position like that where it's hard to tell where you're going to go is very useful. Right here at the end of the round, Sean dips in and kind of comes in over the top with a nice left hook and finishes the round off. I don't think that was enough to steal it. If I kind of watch the whole round in slow motion like that, I'm going to give that round slightly to DDP. Like I said, these rounds are close. Sean clearly wins the first. 2 and 3 are more up in the air. I think DDP probably won that round more clearly than maybe the last round, but I kind of leaned towards DDP on the last round too. I don't know, man. It's hard. These rounds are super tight. Sean's gonna slightly land a jab here between the guard again. DDP is going to pressure forward, go off to his left side slightly. And this is, I think, a good move for Sean to look for, is this little check hook going backwards. Pushes DDP into Sean's right hand, which is probably one of the harder shots that Sean's landed in the fight overall. He doesn't land too many right hands overall. And then DDP comes forward, kind of lands a little overhand there, not a ton on it, goes for the head kick, and doesn't do much with it. Probably would have been better served going to the body. Anytime that DDP just stands in front of Sean, he just eats that jab. And that's really just the big tool for Sean of this whole fight, is DDP kind of standing still in high guard and getting jabbed. Here's an example of what I was talking about earlier with Sean backing up with his hand down and is crossing his feet. So the bad footwork and hand placement. DDP comes forward. Sean's left hand's low right here. As he comes forward, he is not in the greatest position. So he's getting really square because he's bringing his left foot back, and that actually gets him hit really hard. Very hard shot from DDP, and throws Sean back pretty badly here. Sean actually lands like a little left hook himself there. or a little right hook, I'm sorry. Gets a little right hook off here. Really sneaky little right hook, and that throws DDP off the line. But Sean, I think, takes the worst of those two punches. Really, really, really clean little punch from Sean as well in the middle of that. But that, if you kind of look up into the eye right here, that is 100% what caused this cut on the other side. So at this point now, Sean has cuts on both sides of his eyes. And then DDP goes in for the head outside single, drives, and his entrances are pretty deep on these right off the bat, but doesn't really get anything for it. And they break free, and you can already see how DDP has caused Sean Strickland's eye to get bloody. I know Sean recently said if it wasn't for headbutts, I wouldn't have had a problem, but I mean, if we're being honest, that punch is what caused that cut right here. DDP kind of just moves out of the way of a cross, throws, and then Sean actually ducks and throws. And it's funny about this, in my opinion, is DDP kind of freezes up, almost like not expecting this, because it's like one of the few times Sean's actually like sat down like he's going to throw a hard strike or go for a shot. DDP just kind of eats that shot like he wasn't really prepared for the level change there. Here, DDP kind of fights the front hand, kind of fades away from the punch, and makes Sean eat a kick to his body. Just keep using that body kick. I think that's where it's at for DDP in the fight coming up. It's a good counter jab from Sean here. He hits the counter jab and then comes with the overhand and lands that really hard, clean shot from Sean there. Again, one of the harder shots Sean lands. Gets like maybe one of those a round, it seems like. Here, DDP switches his stance, fights the hand, come over the top with the check left hook. Doesn't really land it super clean. You can see the significant strikes is 70 for Sean and 33 for DDP to the head. Most of that is just the jab. It's just Sean's jab, and I don't know if I agree with that entirely. I'm watching this in slow motion. There's a lot of shots that were like on the forearms or on the gloves. Here, DDP is going to counter the jab, catches the jab, goes for the leg, and that's a classic. And as Sean gets tired, I think that'll be there. Going to be off screen, but again, DDP fakes low and then comes with the calf kick, and I think he hits that calf kick, just judging by how red Sean's getting, calf is getting, and then DDP eats a jab, and a lot of those jabs they're counting are kind of like that, where it's like this kind of stuff, where it's hitting a lot of his arms or just grazing him. DDP parries the jab here, comes over the top of the right hand, comes back with the left, and then a cross. I don't know if the cross lands, obviously, from the angle we're at. Goes for a big left hook, misses it. Sean tries to get a body lock, and it's pretty clear who's the stronger guy. I think here they get into this wrestling exchange, and it is an easy takedown for DDP. And from my perspective, again, more than anywhere that DDP has the advantage, it's just in these exchanges, these wrestling exchanges, these grappling exchanges. It just seems like he is able to kind of muscle Sean around a little bit in these, and I just think, man, why not take advantage? Why not take advantage of this? Sean, as always, does a good job. Gets up, puts his hip to the cage, fights the hand. This is pretty much modern way of breaking off the cage nowadays. Most guys will just give up their back and push their hip to the cage so you can't get the leg around it. Right here, DDP almost hops in like he's going to be going for a almost kind of tie hoppy, like comes forward like he's going for a switch knee. So he's reaching out to control the hand so he can go for the knee or the kick here. And Sean has not seen this yet, so he doesn't react super comfortably, right? He backs up, he tries to throw the jab because that's what he always does. Tries to throw his cross, and the process gets squared and comes over the top. And this is, again, pretty hard shot. DDP lands, boom, nice hard clean shot there on the bloodied eye already. And then DDP lands a really nice jab and then ducks underneath. I think he gets poked in the eye on the separation there. This is really where DDP splitzes start to become more of an issue for Sean. He's going to fight the lead hand a little bit here. Comes across with the cross. Now he's switching his stance as he comes through. Sean's left arm is low, so the right hand's coming over the top here. Bang. That's going to land. Right here, you're going to see him clash heads a little bit. Bang. And Sean can complain about that, but he caused that more than DDP did. So DDP blitzes forward here. Neither guy really lands anything. Little maybe shot there from DDP, but he's got Sean thinking, okay, we're striking Sean, and then just blows straight through him on an easy takedown here. And this is just heavy. And honestly, right here, is interesting to me. Looking off to the side, I think he's trying to see what time it is. If I had to guess, his legs are totally flat. If DDP had a little Dagestani wrestling, hate to be that guy, he could lift these legs, triangle these legs real quick, and then Sean would have a motherfucking hard time getting back up. This is a pretty bad position if you're the guy on bottom. Um, and but DDP kind of goes to the body lock here. Really needed to like get a leg under Sean's legs in some format to secure that position. And Sean just starts fighting a wrist, posting, getting a knee. He's building himself up, but he's looking up, seeing if he's going to get up. And DDP is just kind of manhandling. Again, not the most technical wrestling at all, but it is effective. Also, I think Adesanya probably has better takedown defense than Sean Strickland, just judging from this fight and Adesanya's fights, and even Adesanya's last fight where he just got knocked out. He still was really basically just stopping takedowns, and DDP was able to take down Adesanya and ultimately make it a huge issue for Adesanya to the point where I think it caused a lot of the issues that Adesanya had late with DDP. And I just wonder if DDP adds in a little bit more wrestling, will he be able to more functionally secure the decision that he's going to get over Sean? Sean's basically impossible to put away in your Leslie like Alex Pereira or somebody like that. It's very, very hard to like, I think, finish Sean in a striking scenario. So I'd be interested if he went the route of more of a grappling scenario. And they get right up. They're both tired. Sean is going to be a little out of position with his footwork here. So Sean is not normally a southpaw, obviously. So this is probably not the stance you want to be in. Again, if you're DDP, he switches the stance constantly, so he's a little more comfortable being in opposite stances, but Sean's kind of out of position here, and he's super square when he goes for this. So his left foot, right foot, you can see out of position, misses the jab off to the side and eats the overhand because of it, but gets back to position quickly. Right here, Sean wants to throw. So he's thinking jab, and DDP shows that kick. And honestly, if GDP had actually just thrown his kick, it would land. But you can look at how much he doesn't want to eat that body kick, and how much he's squared to get away from it. So again, I think that's just an opportunity for DDP to just go towards it a little bit more in their next fight. Right here, Sean overcommits on a jab a little too long, doesn't get out of position, tries to duck under, and eats, I think, a right uppercut there. I'm actually positive it's a right uppercut because now I'm thinking about it. I think there's a picture of Sean eating that uppercut out there, and it's a pretty hard shot. He could take a shot here. Sean throws the overhand right here. DDP kind of pulls away from him, gets the arm in the way. Now DDP, anytime he ducks, he's getting that big reaction right there from Sean. And that is due to the wrestling. That's due to the wrestling at this point. And what's nice about that is when you can get a guy ducking down like that, it makes other things easier. Anytime you duck down, he's like that, you know the leg kick's going to be there. Then it makes it easier for you to like duck and go into body kicks, things of that nature. Right here, DDP just kind of looks at the jab and kind of does what Sean does what DDP's been doing to him the whole time. He just throws the jab and then ducks his head off to the side and throws the overhand. And DDP has the same bad habit I was talking about that Sean was doing after he throws his jab. So you'll see him right here. He'll throw his like left jab here, right? He eats the jab, and then he'll drop his left hand, and then he's in this kind of bad Philly shell position. And yeah, your arm's out of position, bud. And basically gets clothesline. Now, luckily, it's way up the forearm, so I don't think that it was like a huge shot, but it counts. I think the fourth round was pretty clearly DDP, just like I think the first round was pretty clearly Sean Strickland. 2 and 3 are the ones that people are gonna debate on a little bit more, 3 in particular. So for me, I have a 2-2 or even 1-3 DDP. Right here, DDP double funk that fakes the jab, goes for the hook, and hits a nice body kick, and then comes out with goofiness to protect himself. DDP's fighting a hand, lets Sean get on the inside and eats a jab for it. And then he stands in front of him too long with the high guard and eats another jab. Now, again, hard to say. See, this is the problem with the high guard. The high guard always makes it look like you get hit, even when you don't. So the only person who really knows are like probably the ref, Sean, and DDP are the only people who really know, or maybe some of the people cage side who could see it really up close. there's a lot of times you're going to be in high guard and somebody hits and it's going to look bad because it's hitting you and it's making you kind of move back, but it doesn't really mean you took it. There's a, and sometimes it's going to split and really just hit you, So from this angle, I think it landed, but it's hard to say. And right here is going to be a good example of what I'm talking about. Like, I don't think that punch landed. I think that hit his arms and kind of bounced his arms open. And we can watch it again really quick here, but it's a little hard to say. But you could watch, right, as this goes forward, he's going to fake, and then he throws. Arms are closed, right? So both his arms are touching, and it hits the guard and kind of splits open the guard. I don't think that counts because it's for a professional fighter hitting another professional fighter, like that punch barely really made any contact. Right here, Sean's going to use a technique I really like. We call it circle jabs or long threes. What he's going to do is he's going to throw his punch almost exactly like he would throw his jab, so it looks very similar. And then what's going to happen here is his arm's almost totally straight, right? So his arm's basically like, I'm throwing a jab at you like this, his arm's hitting like this, and what he's doing is he's hitting and then cutting across, almost like clothesline style. And when you first start doing it, it feels like it has no power, but it's not so much that it has a lot of power. It has as much power as a jab. It's just that it hits very clean, and you'll see bang, see bang, bang, and it's a very easy way to get around guards. It works really well, and he lands that very nicely. And honestly, I think that's a shot Sean needs to go to more in this fight. It's basically a jab again. So your jab's here and straight, and then you're just cutting off to the side, just barely, and you're coming around, right? So bang, 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 and you're just snapping it through, but it's long. It's very straight like that. A great technique. I use it all the time. It's one of my favorite tools to help my jab. Your jab, right? Jab, right? I'm just around the outside of that guard. Here, what you're going to see is I think a jab land, because we're going to end up with the ref in the way, but hard to say. But he comes back, kind of eats a jab, and kind of eats overhand. The thing with the way that these guys are at is some of these punches that land, they didn't land. Again, if you've really done striking for a long time, what you're gonna realize is there's a lot of punches that hit you, but they have like nothing on them because you're moving away from the shot so much that it's like by the time it touches you, it would feel essentially very like this, like the same way that my hand is being touched, right? If I kind of move my hand away at the same time I'm hitting it, I'm not really getting anything. If I'm coming forward, there's a huge difference in how that's going to be, right? If I move my hand away and it's just barely getting like touched, the amount of force actually going into them is so minimal that it just doesn't make a difference. And that's a good example of that. I'm not sure either guy got a huge, got popped in the mouth a bunch. This is one of the reasons I kind of want, weirdly, I want AI and I want mouthpieces. They have this mouthpiece technology where it's able to register the force. So when you get hit in the face, it can tell the force at which you're getting hit. And I'm a big fan of that because I think one of the hardest things to judge when you're watching fights is what, at least when it comes to striking, is what actually really should count it as landed and what shouldn't. There's a lot of punches that land, but they basically have no force. You're talking like 10 to 20% of the total amount of force created is maybe contacting, and it's almost nothing. Whereas some punches land, and it's like these little inside punches where somebody walks into it and they get hit, and nobody sees it. But those punches are way worse. There was a punch that DDP ran his face into a jab like way earlier in the fight, and that punch probably had twice to three times the amount of force of a lot of the jabs that Strickland has been landing, and I doubt most people even saw it. Right here, DDP switches his stance, hard kick right there. That is a kick that he should be going to more. If you watch this land, this is a horrible spot to for Sean to land. So Sean's bottom hand, normally when you block a kick, you get both hands in way, and you're trying to get it across both arms and push it down so you go more into the thicker part of the arm here. Strickland's bottom hand missed, So the kick's over the top. So he is kicking him clean in the forearm right here, right where the wrist's at, like high, which is probably one of the worst places to get kicked. I've been kicked very hard by professional Muay Thai fighters in the arms before in sparring, and I can tell you that when they kick you, and if you block incorrectly, your hand will go completely numb, right? It could break your forearm. That's maybe the best way to put it. You could snap your forearm in half. So I think DDP should be going to this more often. Again, I'm harping on this left kick, but I think for DDP this is borderline strike wise what Sean's jab is for his game. And then right after he lands it, you could just see how he's like, okay, I know that affected you, and he's going to use that to make Sean feel essentially like uncertain as to where he's going, right? He fakes like he's going for that left overhand, right? So we watch this kick, right? Kick comes up, boom, blocks it poorly. Didn't enjoy that. That sucks. Now DDP is going to kind of fake high with the left hand, fake. And now Sean's like, fuck, I don't know what's coming. Is it an overhand? Is it a kick? What is it? And it opens up him getting underneath him. Then Sean has to super overreact, right? So basically that's down, like wrestling, what we call wrestling down block, right? So the arm drops down, the leg goes back because he's trying to defend against the single, puts his head into a bad position and almost eats that uppercut. And if DDP had just not been so like ham-fisted and big about this, would have probably landed. This is going to be one time where DDP lands a really solid jab counter to Sean's jab. So DDP goes to a high guard here in a second, and then times Sean doing his step. Again, Sean likes to step off to the left side. DDP slips down and throws his jab, and right here, bang, steps off and throws the jab. Solid counter, and pretty big effect. Sean wasn't loving it. Here's an example of high hand winning the jab game, especially as people get tired, athletic ability and reflexes go away, so technique needs to matter more. And DDP right here is in a better position. Sean's left hand is low, and DDP's right hand is high. They are in a southpaw open stance to each other, and DDP just throws a jab, and he's close, right? The lead hand here is always very close to the face when they switch stances. This is why you usually fight hands so much, but Sean's not, and he eats a jab because of it. And you can see right away Sean starts fighting the hand, comes in for the jab, goes for the cross, misses, but he was going right back to fighting that hand. DDP goes into the high guard here and just way too wide on the high guard. This is too wide. Why is this so wide now? Earlier DDP was really tight with his high guard, right? Well, the reason is because Sean Strickland had thrown a circle jab or the long three we talked about. So now DDP is like, well, I have to block the sides of my head, which leaves him more open down the center, and then that allows Sean to land this nice little jab right down the middle. It's a really clean shot. For the most part, he skimmed the arm a little bit. I don't know how much he landed it super hard, but it was just right there. They're showing the head, body, leg strikes, 99 for Strickland, 55 for DDP to the head, but the big difference is down here in the wrestling. This is where people point to when they talk about that it was obvious that Sean Strickland won, and I'll move this out of the way for a second here, but this to me is not always the best indicator. Most of these are going to be your jabs right here. Also, I don't agree with these counts. I see these CompuBox things all the time. I used to trust this a lot more than I do now, but since I've been slowing down these videos and watching them at 0.25 to 0.5 speed, the amount of strikes that I actually think that like count and land are far lower than what really would count and land. I don't think DDP's landed 50 shots to Sean's head at all, and I don't think Sean's landed 100 shots to DDP's head at all. I do think that Sean is up on the strikes to the head, and I do think that DDP is behind. But you could probably cut these two numbers in half, and I think that would be a lot closer to what's real. Here, Sean's probably going to land a jab, it looks like. A little bit, but he gets countered with the leg kick. Again, that's like one of those ones where I don't know if I agree if that landed or not. I mean, it looks like it hits DDP, both of DDP's forearms. Yeah, I don't know if that even got through at all, but DDP uses that to set up a leg kick, which does land, clearly. Again, it's so hard to say if some of these jabs are landing, and that's my only issue whenever I see these numbers. To me, I don't know if I would count that as a solid shot. Again, I'd have to see a better angle, but it looked like he hit him mainly on the gloves, and if it's like if we're counting those, then I don't know, man. Like, what do we? Are we just counting anything that grazes the face? So after a while, I just kind of go like, what is the stuff that's like relatively clean? I don't consider that a clean land, so I wouldn't count that. I think this is a better example of Sean landing through the high guard. So you're going to see the high guard come up from DDP here, and Sean is going to punch through, and you can see from this angle the contact, right? So the glove is on his face, the wrists are apart, it cuts through, and obviously he lands that. I would count that as definitely a landed punch. And Sean knows, by the way. You can tell like when Sean lands because he has like his body language, that's the word I was looking for, is kind of gives away like he knows when he kind of landed. DDP switches stance, fights lead hand, goes for a jab, and Sean slips to the inside of it and actually comes over the top with a counter left, which is a good strategy here. DDP actually has his guard up here, but it's going to kind of come around and make contact behind the guard. This is the problem with having like a high guard in MMA is that, again, the gloves aren't very big, so getting around them in these situations definitely happens. I would count that as a strike. Landed kind of goofy, but again, it lands. And I think it was a pretty hard shot overall. It's, again, like Sean gets like one or two of those around. Here's another example of the high guard stopping the jab, in my opinion. So again, I wonder if they're counting these kinds of shots as landed jabs, because to me that didn't land. And if you watch it like a little bit faster right here, that didn't land. That was just him hitting the wrist. Then he tries to come around with the hook, which is smart. I think Sean needs to do that a lot. Here DDP doesn't set up his takedown as well. He just ducks underneath and shoots in. So this has been working for him, but Sean's starting to pick up on it. And Sean gets a pretty heavy sprawl here, sprawls out, and comes up to their feet. I'd imagine they've worked that a lot in their camp. What's his last name? Eric, the coach at Extreme Couture. He's a really good coach from what I've seen, and I think that if I had to guess, he's probably making Sean do a lot of drills involving striking to sprawls. DDP switches his stance here, beats the inside foot from what I can gather from the hips. They, again, just a pet peeve of mine, they record MMA fights way too goddamn close. You should be able to see what their feet are doing a lot more. It's not a boxing match. But DDP beats the inside of the hand and the inside of the foot, throws a jab, lands a really nice jab there. I believe he kind of eats a little hook himself here. Yeah, he does. So they both exchange. I think the jab is a little bit more effective than the hook, but we'll call that a wash. Sean will come over the top here with the hook. He's going to block that. It's going to be all arm. And Sean drives a jab, kind of lands. DDP comes back, kind of misses. DDP throws it across the body here, doesn't really land. He's going to drop in for a jab to the body, come with the overhand. That does land, I believe, just judging by the fact that Sean's head kind of pops back. If I was coaching DDP for this fight, it would be a lot more of this. Sean has a really good jab, and he has to get it going, and he has to really hit you with it for him to feel like he's going to win a fight. He'll throw teeps, but he's not really throwing them against DDP, and I think it's because he feels like he doesn't have the space, and DDP is going to run him over and take him down. And so if you fight this front hand like this, it's pretty hard for Sean to feel like he can get his jab off. He's going to feel like he has to do this, like he has to fight hands, And I think this is a good strategy, especially with somebody like DDP who has such a good left hook, or left roundhouse kick. Where DDP has seemed to have lost the most is when he's in a traditional stance. Anytime he's in a traditional stance here with Sean, he's more or less lost the exchanges, but when they're in switch stance, he easily wins most of those exchanges. And here's a good example of what I'm talking about. He goes to the high guard. He's in a traditional stance with a better boxer here. So he's we can highlight this really quick. I won't go over it like crazy, but you can look at where Sean is to the inside of his body here, and you can look at where DDP is to his body, right? So Sean's inside of his hips. DDP is slightly over his hips. His weight is shifting forward. Sean's weight is in the middle, kind of more like you're going to swing a bat or throw something. And then Sean is going to be able to throw just a jab here. and just get a jab off, right? Just very basic. He's able to shift his weight, start from farther away, right, and reach DDP because DDP's already kind of forward, and then he kind of throws like a little pushy second jab and backs him up. And to me, that's the spot. Like, if I'm in Sean's corner, I would absolutely just be like, man, double up your jab anytime he is in a traditional stance. If you can jab him and teep him with that lead teep, double up that jab and teep him, and occasionally come around with those circle jabs and those long threes, it's an easy night. But DDP doesn't tend to back up, so you really got to like pop him to get him going away. And right here, right after that exchange, you're going to see DDP dip super hard for a takedown, drives him back, makes Sean basically completely have to sprawl super hard to the ground. And again, even if you're not getting those, you just run into him a little bit and you make Sean have to sprawl. It's going to make your life a little easier if you're having to strike with him later. And right here is a good example of why he lands the jab here. He switches his stance. Anytime you have to wrestle and you get tired, it sucks. So then you start doing stuff that's not very smart, like be very square here, your feet, hand down, hands together, just looking forward. And DDP's not in the greatest position either. He's tired as well. But we always talk about a high hand wins on the opposite stance. Sean's hand couldn't get up in time. Eats a really very hard jab from DDP right there and reacts with the overhand, but DDP rolls away from it again. And I don't understand where in the world they're getting 26 to 16 significant strikes. I don't know. Once again, DDP will switch his stance here. He'll have high hand. So high hand is right here. Sean's lead arm is down in the switch stance because he's tired, and his go-to is the Philly shell position. DDP's hands high and now very close, right? Because he's in a southpaw position, and when he goes to throw the jab, it'll be there because Sean's arm will not be able to get up in time to defend it, and he's no longer as fresh as he was. And we always talk about this. Technique needs to be so good and so fundamental that even when you're tired, you're kind of doing it. And so when you're doing certain things like head movement and when you're doing reactionary stuff, as you get tired, those things get worse. So it kind of exposes when you have like a habit of, let's say, just dropping your left arm into a Philly shell position against the opposite stance. And again, lands the jab. Sean's left hand drops down low. DDP's hand comes high. They both fight hands because Sean's like, well, I don't want to get jabbed again. DDP grabs the front hand, which is always one of the best moves. Sean Philly shells back, pulls backwards. DDP goes to the outside leg, lands the outside leg, then goes to a body kick. This is one of the few times I think I've ever seen Sean in a high guard, but this is also due to fatigue. Sean's realizing he's getting tired and is making, in my opinion, actually not the worst decision in the world here. He's going, okay, I'll just go high guard to help with my defense because I'm getting too tired to try to reflex away from stuff. And it actually kind of helps here because it kind of guards against that. He gets the roll away, try to come back with a shot. DDP ducks underneath. And then I believe Sean goes right back into a high guard again here. Just trying to defend against these big shots. It's not the worst choice. Like, you can see a lot of these shots are just bouncing off his arms now because DDP throws these really big wild shots. So just kind of keeping your hand. DDP's not like a sniper who's going to like cut your guard in half, right? He like comes around with these big loopy shots, and where he's going to catch you is when your guard is like away, but you're trying to move your head. That's where he's going to catch you. So if your guard's just kind of high, right, and he's coming in and you're kind of just defending with your arms, right, you could stop a lot of his shots. And weirdly enough, like if Sean almost adopted a bit of a high guard, I think it might actually be kind of easier to deal with him. Right here, DDP steps across, throws the left hook. Sean kind of evades it. He throws his jab back. DDP tries to throw the overhand, but he's dropping his left hand right here. And Sean ducks it, comes with the counter overhand. Right here, my mistake. Right. DDP's left arm's low. And that comes around the guard and lands a little bit. So I would count that as a pretty decent shot. And then he goes right back to a 1-6, and I think that 6 probably landed a bit as well. And they're definitely getting towards the end of the fight here. What's funny is that Sean's going to throw a jab and an overhand, and it kind of lands here. And what's comical is that's kind of been the strategy of DDP through a lot of this fight, is kind of throw like a wild left shot to an overhand, or a wild right shot to an overhand. And what's comical about that is that it's actually kind of effective against DDP. I think Sean in this fight coming up really has to let his hands go a little bit more. He's he is the clearly better boxer in my opinion, and I think if he just got into some more exchanges like this, he could actually hurt DDP. So he's so committed to just not getting touched at all that I think it makes a lot of his fights very, very, very tight and very hard for people to give him the nod. There's a reason everybody always jokes about, like, he talks like he's gonna like go to war. He talks about how, ooh, that was a good right hook from DDP at the end. I'm not sure Sean lands much of anything through this. That might be the only real strike that made any real difference there. Yeah, and that's the end of the fight. Ooh, man, that fifth round. If I had to judge that fifth round, I think the fifth round goes to Sean. So I don't know. It's a very close fight. I am surprised they gave it to DDP just due to the fact that normally champions kind of end up getting the benefit of the doubt. But I think Sean does not let his hands go enough. I think Sean thinks defense first and offense second. And when I'm saying that, that's fine. But what I mean is Sean thinks defense first and then offense is way down here someplace, right? It's a big difference. And he doesn't tend to counterpunch. You can say that Pereira has like worse defense than Sean, which you definitely can make that argument. But Pereira will counterpunch guys, and when he catches them, it hurts him. And I think Sean could counterpunch more guys. He just doesn't want to take the risk. And I think with somebody like DDP, he really needs to try to like make sure that when DDP fails, he is getting his counters off. So the places that I could see that Sean Strickland can improve, he needs to throw a lot more teeps, a lot more teeps. He has to throw combos occasionally. He needs to throw that little like circle jab more often. He needs to double up on his jab more often. I think it's just a higher output, just generally speaking. It seemed like his output wasn't crazy high, and he needs to come forward, obviously. Look for counter punches are also going to be a bit of that game plan, in my opinion. Problem with Sean Strickland is that Sean has kind of a game that he's honed that is very specific. He throws a jab a lot. He gets behind the Philly shell in the long guard. He has this kind of Muay Thai, very upright stance, so he can get his legs up really quickly, so he can teep and block kicks. The problem with that is that makes it very possible for you to get taken down. It also makes it very difficult for you to fight going backwards, so he loses his footwork a lot. I do think that he could run into some issues if DDP really starts trying to wrestle him a lot. He's gonna kind of have to turn. He's gonna have a hard time because just of his stance just doesn't make him in the best position to stop takedowns. And you can see how much he has to commit to not getting taken down. He has to really like throw himself to the mat. As for DDP, DDP just seems to have a lot more directions he can go to win. He could switch stances off both sides. He was starting to land the leg kick. I think he could go to calf kicks a little bit more. I know Sean does a good job of blocking them, but also a lot of guys don't try to wrestle Sean. So if you wrestle with Sean a little bit, I think those leg kicks are going to be there more because he's going to be more inclined to not want to bring his legs up. I think switching your stance and going to the hard body kick and the hard head kick off the left side, and then occasionally blitzing forward off of switch stances is awkward as hell to deal with somebody like DDP. The grappling is going to be a big difference. I would be wrestling a lot if I was DDP, like a lot. That is the spot that I thought the DDP clearly had the most advantage in, because it just looked like it was pretty easy when he did get in on like a body lock, getting him down. If I was DDP's coach, I would be trying to focus on getting Sean to back up and then get into like body locks, drive Sean to the cage, and then like try to beat him up on the cage, try to wear on him, make it ugly. I'm not sure Sean. It's hard to say. Sean gets off the cage really fast and well. I don't know how good Sean cage work is and how good he is with somebody like bullying him up against the cage. At the end of the day, Sean's way of fighting produces a lot of very close decision wins or split decision wins or losses, and I think that is an issue. I also think that Sean just has less tools and less directions he can go from this fight. Like how much can he really improve, right? He can add teeps, he can work on counter punching, he can work on groups of combinations being better and looking for like certain counter shots that are available with DDP. But at the end of the day, he's a lot more one dimensional. Now that one dimension is very high, it's debatable. I think Sean definitely can win this fight. I am not like a Sean hater. I think this fight was crazy close. I'm not sure DDP won. It's very hard to say. If you think Sean won the first 2 rounds, and I think Sean won the fifth, so he would be 3-2. If you think that DDP took 2, 3, and 4, I can see that too. Yeah, there's a lot of arguments to be had. I think Sean clearly won round 1. DDP clearly won round 4. The other ones are a little more debatable. 2 and 3 are really hard to judge. Again, Sean just doesn't have as many places that he can win, in my opinion, and his game has been done for a while, so a lot of people have gotten to see it. DDP seems to be kind of recreating himself every time he fights, and I think he's a little more dynamic, and he can change the way that he fights to game plans a little bit more than Sean is able to. I don't think DDP has reached the height of what he could possibly do, and there's a lot of places for him to improve, and the fact that he's already champion and there's a lot of places for him to improve is pretty incredible, whereas Sean is kind of probably at the zenith of what he is going to do, technically speaking. Anyways, hopefully you found some use in that, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it as always. If you liked the video, please like it. If you would subscribe, that helps me a lot. And hopefully you enjoyed those, guys. So have a good one. Signing off.